Monday of the 14th week in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the book of the prophet Hosea. Thus says the Lord, I will allure her. I will lead her into the desert and speak to her heart. She shall respond there as in the days of her youth, when she came up from the land of Egypt. On that day, says the Lord, she shall call me my husband, and never again my Baal. I will espouse you to me forever. I will espouse you in right and in justice, in love and in mercy. I will espouse you in fidelity, and you shall know the Lord. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm. The response is, the Lord is gracious and merciful. Every day will I bless you, and I will praise your name forever and ever. Great is the Lord and highly to be praised. His greatness is unsearchable. The Lord is gracious and merciful. Generation after generation praises your works and proclaims your might. They speak of the splendor of your glorious majesty and tell of your wondrous works. The Lord is gracious and merciful. They discourse of the power of your terrible deeds and declare your greatness. They publish the fame of your abundant goodness and joyfully sing of your justice. The Lord is gracious and merciful. The Lord is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and of great kindness. The Lord is good to all and compassionate toward all his works. The Lord is gracious and merciful.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. While Jesus was speaking, an official came forward, knelt down before him, and said, My daughter has just died. But come, lay your hand on her, and she will live. Jesus rose and followed him, and so did his disciples. A woman suffering hemorrhages for 12 years came up behind him and touched the tassel on his cloak. She said to herself, If only I can touch his cloak, I shall be cured. Jesus turned around and saw her and said, Courage, daughter, your faith has saved you. And from that hour the woman was cured. When Jesus arrived at the official's house and saw the flute players and the crowd who were making a commotion, he said, Go away. The girl is not dead, but sleeping. And they ridiculed him. When the crowd was put out, he came and took her by the hand, and the little girl arose. And news of this spread throughout all that land. The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading comes from the book of the prophet Hosea, chapter 2, verse 16, verses 17c to 18, and 21 to 22. Hosea was married to a woman named Gomer, and she was either a sacred prostitute working in the temple, or a prostitute, or a woman who was not faithful to her marriage vows. Whatever it was, Hosea kept calling her back to fidelity, and she refused to respond. And eventually Hosea realized that his relationship with his wife was a parallel of the relationship between Yahweh and the people of Israel. They too were unfaithful, in spite of the fact that God kept sending prophets to call them back to fidelity. God tries one last ploy in order to bring her back. He's going to lure her into the desert. Now, the desert could be considered a dangerous place with wild animals. But in Hosea, it represents that place where Israel first fell in love with the Lord. Remember when Israel was freed from slavery in Egypt? That period of 40 years, the period of purification before the Israelites could enter the Promised Land, was seen as sort of a honeymoon. And God is calling Israel to a second honeymoon, to get rid of all the distractions that keep her from being faithful to him. In fact, it says that she will call me my husband and not my Baal. The word Baal meant Lord. And remember, instead of using the word Yahweh, the Israelites often used the word Adonai, which also meant Lord. So you can see where there would be a certain amount of confusion. Furthermore, Baal at times was used for husband. So now the import of this message is clear. Baal will no longer be used for husband, no longer be used for God. Israel will call God by the name Yahweh alone. And God's going to espouse her forever, renew his covenant with her. It'll be a covenant of love and mercy. It won't be a covenant of rigorousness, of absolute obedience, in the sense of imprisoning her, but rather a covenant of fidelity, that God will always be faithful to his promises. The Gospel is from Matthew 9:18 to 26. We hear that an official comes to Jesus and says that his daughter died, but he asked that Jesus simply lay his hands upon her and she would come back to life. This is a little bit different from Mark's version, when the daughter of Jairus is not dead, or at least Jesus doesn't hear she's dead, until he actually arrives at the house. Remember, when Jesus brings her back to life, this is not a resurrection, it's a reanimation. That this daughter would die again someday, but for now she's brought back to life. On the way, there's a woman with a hemorrhage for 12 years who comes up behind Jesus and touches the tassel of his cloak. Jesus turns around and sees her. Now in the Gospel of Mark, the version has it a little bit different. Jesus turns around and is not sure who touched him. Matthew has Jesus a little more certain of this. What does Jesus say to her? Your faith has saved you. Notice, not healed, but saved. In the Gospels, when there's an act of healing which doesn't include faith, then the people simply say that she was healed, he was healed. When faith is included, the word used is saved, because a person is healed not simply physically, but also spiritually. And may God bless us.